hope you're prepared for this episode's guest. Someone known as the lead singer of post-hardcore band Frodus. Someone known as the face behind synthwave project Tanamura Midnight. Someone known as the mysterious Triobelisk. And some cats will know him as Catbeats. Shelby Cinca, punk rocker from Washington DC turned lo-fi beat maker, joined me to talk about everything from his mind-boggling board game Zomplex to artificial intelligence. Don't you also wish you had cats you could play lo-fi beats to? Shelby is also the head of Swedish Columbia Records, a record label based in Gothenburg, Sweden, which houses a number of extremely talented artists, and you should absolutely get stuck into it if you like Shelby's work. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Shelby.
Where are you exactly? What city?
Brighton, do you know what that is? It's okay.
It's like the mod capital.
Yeah, well, was a mod.
Was the mod capital. Played a show there at a kind of a divey bar in the 90s.
What's it called? Do you remember?
I could look. I have an old HTML file I can pull up. I feel like that was a very strange pairing too, if it was that show. Let's find out. Okay. Right.
I don't remember many venues from the 90s, but
it was the Free Butt.
Never heard of it.
Funny name.
Must have been before my time.
Yeah, May 2nd, 97. That's funny. I thought I played in Manchester we played with the day after. That's the show I remember.
What band was that with?
This was with Frodus, and we were touring with a Swedish band called Nine. I remember the day 2 days after that we played in Manchester with Voorhees in State of Filth, like proper crusty drunk punk British bands. But they were very nice. They were very funny. They enjoyed us.
I want to read off a list here. So, Frodus, The Jerks, Loki and the Improbable Solution, Mancake, the Decahedron. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce how it's said. The Cassettes, Frantic Mantis, Mana Wasp, Triobelisk, Travelers of Time, Tanamura Midnight, Catbeats. Is there anything I'm missing out, or was that?
Well, I guess Guitar for El Cuervo.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I'm more like your main projects, I guess.
I mean, a lot of those were kind of one-offs. I would say or like side project things. I mean, Triobelisk was my main electronic thing for a while. When I was starting to create more electronic music, and then it kind of shifted to Tanamura Midnight and Catbeats currently. But I would say the core would be Frodus, the Cassettes, Triobelisk, Catbeats, and the Travelers of Time, actually, oddly enough, the longest spanning project.
You started that during Frodus, didn't you? Travelers of Time.
Yeah, like in 94, I believe.
Wow. Is that still going?
It's still going. We actually recorded a new album this year. We hadn't done anything for 5 years or something. My partner, Jim, is kind of this genius composer guy, lives in Chicago, but he grew up in the DC area. He was the first bassist for Frodus, actually. And we just kept this project going. It would take lapses and then come back. And I think the pandemic gave us a reason, but what really gave us a reason is this label who in the 90s asked us to do a song for a tribute to the British instrumental band The Shadows.
Okay.
which we did a cover song on that compilation. They asked us to be a part of their tribute to The Ventures this last year, 2020. We're like, oh, well, we got to do it, because
Yeah.
when he does comps, he's really like, he gets it to the original artists. And I was always a big surf music fan when I was learning to play guitar. So it's cool to hear that, like for me, when the Shadows actually listened to the compilation and gave little notes on what they thought of all the covers, I was like, wow, that's pretty amazing. So the Adventures one, I was like, we have to do it, because the source will hear it. So it'd be super fun. So that kind of, we did that song. We're like, we should do some more songs. And then it just kept on going. Basically me recording to a click, adding a keyboard or something else, or even a rough drum idea, and then sending it to him. He adds pretty much everything else, and then back to me for an iteration. And then I end up mixing it usually. And the small world thing with Jim is he's now scoring the new game that the Hotline Miami guys are doing. So it's all become very
I didn't know
cross-pollinated.
Is it Hotline Miami 3?
No, they're doing something different. But Jim's he was an orchestra conductor at one point, right. So he can kind of write these big arrangements, and he's very versatile in his composing. So so I would say that is a project that has kind of gone on the longest. Fun. Oddly, that the Shadows one that compilation was the first kind of pre-internet mail order recording session, where we recorded the drums and guitar onto on the tape, on the 1/2-inch 8-track, and then sent them to Chicago, where he added theremin, played bass, and did everything else, and back to us, and then we mixed it. So it was the shape of things to come, since now we were sending, I don't know, as of 10 years ago or a little more, we were starting to send files to each other. So
strange times, surely.
Yeah.
You mentioned like surf guitar and such, like because I noticed like on, what was it, the Jerks, and like more towards the Jerks, and a bit later on it's kind of a bit more surfy guitar. Like where does that influence come from, do you think?
Well, the Jerks was definitely a one-off thing at the same time as Travelers of Time. Just a love for like garage rock, surf rock. There was, in the 90s, there was, I think, a pretty big revival of that stuff. Manor Astroman from Georgia, I believe, were a pretty well-known kind of instrumental surf band, who later signed to Touch and Go, recorded with Steve Albini, I think, and all that. And it went a little less traditional surf, but let's say them, and there's a lot of indie surf labels, and there's a garage label from Bellingham, Washington called Estrus. And I was like a member of their 7-inch club back in the 90s. This is during like early Frodus days. And I just always loved all that stuff, kind of at the same time of loving like DC Discord stuff. It was, this whole kind of 60s garage surf revival thing. I think the UK, I don't know, actually, I don't know I can't think of any. There was definitely a lot of labels happening in the UK and Spain at that time too. But to my mind, I remember all the US ones. There was Sundays that did a lot of reissues of obscure out of print garage, like the Druids of Stonehenge was a notable one I remember. And then, Shadows of Night, kind of these,
nice name.
Kinks kind of in the whole Beatles era, but when things were getting a little more, I guess, a little weirder for a second there.
Yeah.
The Beatles never really went. I mean, they went really far. They went their whole psychedelic period, but they never really had the kind of almost punk aspect that the Kinks, I think, production-wise, Revolution, the the single version is very distorted and pretty intense if you listen to it. But then I think the Kinks and some other bands were kind of taking it to another level. And then Joe Meek, of course, was pioneering kind of a weirder production style with like surf and like garage and R&B bands back then.
I think the Beatles were kind of all over the place, really. They didn't just have one style, so
No.
they made. Well, I heard that the Cassettes were quite influenced by the White Album.
It became that way, but at first it was more kind of I don't want to say revivalist, but more kind of I would say bubblegum 60s-ish psych pop. There was a lot of Badfinger being listened to, and like Oddly Enough Wings by the bassist. The band was basically the bassist and the drummer who are also in Dead Meadow. So what happened, why the band changed, is Dead Meadow started to pick up steam, so they went and focused on that with the guitarist of Dead Meadow as a 3-piece, and then I just reformed the band first as a 2-piece with my friend Sadat, who's a Pakistani American musician that I'd known since the 90s. He plays tabla and drums, and a very musical and very songwriter thinking drummer, which is unique. But we quickly just wrote a bunch of songs and ended up playing CMJ, the college music journal, kind of a festival in New York, whenever that was that year, in 98. No, it was 2000 maybe. Don't recall the exact year, with Dead Meadow. So they were just like, what? We just left the band and you already like have all these songs. So that was a funny thing. And then we kind of, it didn't, when we played the old song, it just didn't make any sense. It was just a different dynamic with Sadat. So then it became a bit more, I guess, rootsy in the sense of White Album. It kind of became more eclectic and bluesy, but also like bringing his like classical Indian music influences, playing tabla and all that. So, which is a bit an era of Beatles, but we just kept on rolling with that concept. So,
it was just George Harrison's influence, I guess.
Paul McCartney, Rocky Raccoon. I guess the whole, definitely George Harrison. On my side, it was probably Paul McCartney, but the Indian classical music influence. But there's oddly, I think, similarities with kind of open tuning blues and Indian music. With like, you have this, when you're in an open tuning, there's like this drone always happening, like an open G or whatever, and there's a drone in like sitar music. So we actually would be playing kind of these bluesy open G tuning songs. He'd be playing tablas and he'd have a shruti box just doing a sitar drone. We were playing live. It's a cool little device, like this metal box with LEDs. You can choose the tuning and adjust the drone. So it was great. It fell into place very, very neatly.
What do you think? Like your favorite project you've been part of? Like what was the most fun you had? Like touring and just recording records.
Favorite is hard. They're all kind of special time capsules based on what's happening in our lives and kind of this musical culture happening around us at the time. I mean, Frodus had a lot of interesting moments recording Conglomerate International with our friend Jonathan Krynick producing, and this engineer Bruce Kane, who oddly worked on Rick James albums back in the day. So it's a funny pairing, but Bruce had like a very nice vintage studio like near the airport in the DC area, and would tell us stories of recording Party all the time, like with Eddie Murphy and Rick James, and weird Rick James stories. I don't know. I think we just, why we chose him to record, to engineer the album, I think we just liked the kind of classic vintage thing happening there. And Jonathan he worked with the band Trans Am at the time. And he recorded a bunch of demos for us and recorded Travelers of Time and the Jerks, and was able to kind of get these really big bombastic sounds out of minimal equipment. He's a very like knowledgeable audio engineer, and he kind of took it to this other level, oddly a bit different in that space. It was a bit more produced and colder, which is what we kind of wanted to create, a bit more of a Devo, Gary Newman-esque hardcore record at the time. So I mean, I think recording every record is super fun and interesting. It's like painting a new picture with audio in a different space. So I can't say there's a favorite. I like them all for different reasons.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Absolutely. What's the most craziest like experience you've had like on tour?
On tour? Crazy. Wow. What is it?
I mean, I'm sure there's plenty, but like
I mean, I feel like a lot of times we were bringing the crazy. Maybe Mancake was bringing the crazy because of, I don't know if you've seen YouTube videos of like VHS tapes of that. I mean, the singer who was the drummer of Frodus, would come out on like carpenter stilts, waving like an axe with a microphone taped to it, or would come out in like this kind of crappy bear costume.
Jeez.
And just like we heard basically injuring himself, falling into the mic, his forehead bleeding, and we'd be like tumbling and biting people and throwing pancakes at the crowd. So that band is the drummer Frodus singing, me on guitar, Mike from Darkest Hour on bass, and our friend Eric Astor, who played in this band, Samuel, who now actually owns and runs Furnace Vinyl and CD manufacturing in Virginia, a record pressing plant, him on drums. So we were definitely bringing a lot of crazy ourselves. Weird story. You just made me think of a very odd Frodus story where we broke down somewhere in, oh gosh, Wisconsin, and like off the side of the road, and we just this is before, I don't think we had AAA. This is 90s. I almost want to say 96, 95, 90, like we're very young. Some guy just pulls up and picks us up in his he's like, he has a tow truck. Like, oh, we broke down. He's like, oh, I'll help you out, tow you into town, and you can stay at our place. And it was a bit he was very nice and kind of would say a bit lewd comments when he was driving around. We're like, okay, this is weird. And then gonna stay in this, I don't think it was a trailer, but almost a trailer, and it was a bit backwoods. And then it just got weird with like his like girlfriend saying the next morning, like, I was like, I'm gonna put a hex on you, like to like the drummer, like you came to me in the night in my dream, or like it's really weird. It started to get really weird. We're like, we gotta go. This is super weird. But he was the mechanic guy was super chill the whole time and just driving us around wherever we were in Wisconsin, saying I don't know, lewd comments about people that he'd observe. It was weird in the sense as time slowed down and you're like, I think we're gonna get out of this and I think we're gonna be alive, but this is kind of nuts. Like this is very strange.
That must have inspired like some songs or like some kind of no.
I think we just almost like blanked it out. I mean, there's so much. America is just strange, especially late at night. I mean, now it's probably still strange late at night. In the 90s, like ending up at these Denny's and like, you know, with Denny's is like a kind of a chain of late night diners, if you're not aware. And just some of them were like so chaotic. Like there is like, is there even a manager running it right now? Because people are just like serving themselves, like bizarre things like that, or like sitting at a table and all of a sudden a guy in a wheelchair pulls up and like tells us like this terrible racist joke, and then like backs off, going backwards in his wheelchair, and we're just all looking at each other like, what just happened? Like very Twin Peaks, strange America moments, surreal America.
What are you familiar with like the DC punk scene now? Is it like, is there much presence, do you think?
There seems to be. I follow I still am in touch with friends from DC and music journalist Chris Richards who writes for Washington Post now, and enough people post about different local new bands, especially he's always on top of it. I kind of tip my dunk my feet in there and see what's going on. So it's still vibrant for sure. I mean, maybe not as big, but I think it's relative. It comes and goes. It probably would be bigger if people could go to shows more at the moment, but be interesting to see post-pandemic, like what new things and new energy comes out of all that.
Yeah, definitely. Do you ever go back and listen to old like Frodus records or any old stuff you've done?
Sometimes, not too much, but sometimes I kind of want to take the time capsule and go back there and relive those memories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I suppose it's more about the memories, isn't it? Like brings back like a certain feeling.
A feeling, and also I remember recording it, so it brings back like a specific space and time, I would say. And I mean, even like El Huervo stuff, I remember when we recorded some of the guitar parts for If I Did Them Alone. For a lot of the earlier stuff I worked with him, he almost conducted me. He would like be in a little room, I'd be recording straight into the computer, and he would be like literally moving his hands up in the air, like bring up the intensity here, bring it down. So that was neat.
When did you first start working with him?
Oh gosh, I guess is Daisuke? It might have been one of the first. It's when he started to have more guitar. I have to look at the discography to remember, but I feel like it might have been that when he did Do Not Lay Waste to Homes. Yeah, so we're that's right at the beginning. That's kind of right at the beginning. 2012 that was released.
Was that before Swedish Columbia?
Prior to that, well, no, it was during Swedish Columbia. Prior to that was To Stop You Must Die, which is, there's no guitars on that. And that's actually the album that I don't know. I really like that one. It just brings back just memories of meeting Nicholas and kind of that time period. It's a bit less dark than his later stuff.
Yeah,
which is nothing wrong with being dark, but it's just very different. So it was pretty early on. I would say I started playing with him 2012, 2011, probably.
Well, do you prefer like playing like guitar sessions or like doing your own stuff?
With guitar? With guitar, or in general, I mean, I like both. I think both. Like when like Nicholas wants a guitar part, it's just you kind of enter a space and it's pretty low stress. Like it's not about having to complete anything. It's just, what can I do to make this, the ideas that he has in the song, like lift it up. It's really, I think I actually listened to the interview he did with you. I think he said something about spice or talking in food metaphors, but it's adding the, that I think we'd say butter, me and him in Swedish.
Yeah, no, it's good to like collaborate and just like bounce off each other for sure. Like,
Yeah, I mean, but with him, like nowadays, it's just I just do a take and then he likes it, and
all right.
he'll he'll edit it sometimes, like move things around, even
Yeah, yeah.
kind of almost not recreate a new part, but sometimes if he hears something else, but
Mm.
it's just what he needs. But it would be nice to do something in a room and live with him again, actually, since we literally haven't done that since, I guess we did it over Skype with Rust, but that was still like over five, like I don't know, that's like 8 years ago or whatever.
Jeez. What did you work on? A thing with feathers. It was the last project.
Oh yeah, I'm all over that one. Not on Samband.
Oh yeah,
That's
that was the last one.
his collaboration with Rat Vader, but
Mm.
definitely on Feathers. Feathers is very very live in the sense that it has Dennis playing bass on it,
Mm-hmm.
all over the whole thing. So it's, I never played with them live, but when they did play live for a little bit, it was just live. It was live bass and the backing tracks, and Nicholas playing some live keys and percussion. So I think it captures that time period of when they were like writing and playing live more.
Mm.
So it's different. I would say it's a departure from a bit from the approach on Vandereer, which is more of a kind of produced on his own, not much aside from like me and another guitarist.
Yeah, I'd say Vander is more like hip hop inspired, I guess, or trip hop.
Yeah, I think that's the one he was saying in your interview. Felt like he was giving the fans what they wanted. I'm not sure if that I need to look at this track listing. I guess a little bit with like Rust and things like that. There's definitely some, I wouldn't say Daisuke part 2s, but kind of continuations of that kind of thinking. But I definitely think he went in other territories too. These longer songs and kind of more ambient kind of intros and stuff. So it's cool.
Zomplex. So I didn't know about this at all until I started like researching on you, actually. So it's a pretty mad idea, isn't it? Can you just like roughly explain like what it's about?
That is crazy. I'm gonna turn on a light over here. Hold on. That's it. Yeah, the little cafe lights here. Well, Zomplex is a pretty crazy board game that came up with my friend Kenny Jacobson when we just went hard into board games, kind of the same, kind of similar time actually. Nicholas was doing a lot of board games, and I don't know if he was playing a lot of board games with his collaborator Eric, who they worked on Else Heartbreak video game together with, and Eric's a game designer. And we just had an idea to make a game, and within our game group, and then we just started to flesh out this idea and test it amongst all our friends and everyone we knew. And it was pretty early in the Kickstarter era, where you didn't need kind of a market ready game with pre-reviews already done and everything like you do nowadays. You could kind of have a half-baked idea that's good enough to get the backing to people to help you propel it to reality. I think that you can't really do that anymore with Kickstarter, at least for games. But it was just this crazy mashup fantasy, like dungeon, like space dungeon crawl, like throwing in all sorts of kind of sci-fi ideas, like Ian M. Banks, that authors kind of grandiose space operas, kind of some of his fantastical approaches to science fiction, and then like Jodorowsky's Dune, and like mysticism and kind of far out like interdimensional space theme. But in the end, it is like you're kind of dungeon crawling in this pyramid. And there's a bit of, I guess, a bit of Lord of the Rings in there too, in the sense of you have to control the one ring to rule them all. You're trying in this case, it's like reverse role Lord of the Rings. Like everyone is just trying to get, like everyone's basically Sauron.
Yeah.
Like you're all friends, and then everyone wants to get the ring and win at the end. So it's kind of it has a forced mechanism of just like turning on everyone because it's a hard game. You have to work together to kind of level up within this pyramid or dungeon, whatever you want to call it. But at the end, that last moment, it forces you to turn on other players, to like let them fall, to not help them. So you have to get the ring. But it's a game that I would say doesn't work for all game groups. And I wish I would have known after the fact. Like I felt like it was very adopted by the best reviews came from like role-playing gamers who would take a pause from like their long campaigns and play our board game. And I felt like, oh well, that's probably who we should have marketed it towards, other than like kind of like indie board gamers at the time. And then we also got panned by a prominent board game blogger, and that kind of ruined it for us. And then we ended up just donating to Goodwill. Well, it was a strange moment. It was at a board game convention. I recognized him. I'm like, I should give him the game. And my gut feeling, literally, it was like, don't do it. And I did it.
Right.
And then it just destroyed the game. It's like if we would have just not had a review by him, it would have done better. But the fact that we got a bad review by him just like buried it.
What did he like about it?
I mean, I think initially he might have thought we were a bit strange. He made an offhand comment that we're a bit cultish in our robes. I think he's a bit more conservative. And so that's starting off on the wrong foot. And just, I don't know. I just think the impression of it, and maybe because, like I said, it is a game that is very dependent on the board game group, and it's hard to judge it if you're just looking at it systematically by yourself and not actually playing it and having like that playing it with your comrades and like turning on each other, like feeling like if you just kind of look at it from a systematic standpoint, I don't think you could get the impression like, oh, okay, I don't think this is good. Or if you kind of play it by yourself or whatever. It's more about the people and interactions. So, I mean, I don't want to say he was wrong, but I think my gut was right saying that he didn't need to review it and that it should have gone kind of in a more open interpretation world and probably towards role-playing gamers opposed to like standard indie board gamers. With that in mind, like, I think if I were to do it again, would expand it with some more some RPG elements, maybe role-playing gaming elements, because we did have these characters you can choose. We could have added some traits they would have and kind of add this like RPG element. But I mean, it is what it is. There's no regrets. It's a life lesson, and it's cool that it exists, and the people that enjoy it, and then the rest of the hundreds of copies that are at Goodwill in Southern California, hopefully someone's picking it up and enjoying it too.
I tried looking for a copy, but it's like there's people reselling it for like creator prices.
Nah, you can get it for like $20, I'm sure.
Well, not here, but it's mainly in America.
UK.
So paying like for shipments to get from America to England.
Oh yeah, that'll get you. Actually, I can probably send. I have somewhere in my basement.
I'd love
copies. Yeah, I'll look. Yeah. And we did actually do a follow-up expansion afterwards.
Yeah.
which I did think cleaned up a lot of the issues that the game had previously. It balanced it a little better. I mean, we call it an expansion. In reality, it's a patch in an analog manner.
Yeah. Well, I mean, board games are pretty popular now. Have you ever thought about doing another one anyway?
I mean, it's so much work, like
Mm.
more than making a record or anything else. And
Yeah. Yeah. Can imagine.
I just don't have the energy right now with like 2 kids and job and doing my music stuff, and not now. I mean, I have a card, like a very kind of basic card game that I've had done for a few years that I hope to put out at least on an on-demand fashion. Like, it's just, since it doesn't require a lot of pieces, so I hope to do that. We actually many years ago we showed it at a art gallery in Los Angeles. Me and the artist. It was they are having an exhibition, like pairing up game designers with artists. And most people did video games for this exhibition, but we did this board game based on like the Chinese Sasquatch, the Yeren. It's a cat and mouse game where you have limitations of swapping these terrain tiles, and the climber has to get to the top, and the Yeren has to capture the climber. The climber's looking for some like magical herb at the top of the mountain. And this artist is from Taiwan, so he was really into the mythology of it all. And yeah, it's beautiful, like the wooden version. But then he illustrated like a consumer version. So yeah, I should do that. It's actually been lingering for like 6 years or so, or 7 years at this point.
Well, what's the process of it? Is it like nearly finished, or what's?
I mean, the artwork's done. It's all PSD. Like, yeah, I have all the files. It's just a matter of me going to downloading the Game Crafter templates, or I believe that's the on-demand company that does it, and just getting it up there. I mean, there was a time where I was thinking of kickstarting it, but then, like, I don't know, kids and everything kind of went.
You've produced a couple of video games as well, haven't you?
Video?
Do you still do that now?
Video games or
like develop video games?
I have I did the artwork and helped design Triobelisk with Eric Sveding for iOS.
Right.
But that was super fun, and that kind of tied into the whole Triobelisk and Zomplex worlds. I would say that's my music persona, which had a lot of mythology and kind of went into these other realms. But not since that game. I had a Catbeats game idea that was in a sketchbook, but hasn't happened. Maybe it'll happen. I don't know if I have the focus to make a game on my own.
Well, I feel like Nintendo could be interested, because it's very like Nintendo inspired, isn't it? Catbeats.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely Nintendo inspired. I mean, I had the game idea I had for that was more of an iOS thing, in almost like this cafe management thing game. What meets, if you ever played the game Tapper in the 80s?
No.
All it is you go, it's like a bar, and all these like patrons come, and you have to like go to the different bars, and like the literal arcade game had like a thing where you pull to pour the drink, and then you like throw the drink down the bar, and you go to another thing to. It's kind of a combination of that and like a cafe management thing, but maybe one day. Right now I feel like, I guess, like a true Piscean. Not that I'm that much into astrology, but I fall into those traits. I kind of just go with the flow. So things are opening up a certain way, and like, okay, well, this makes sense. Catbeats vinyl, Catbeats cassette, and kind of build from there.
Is that the main focus in Catbeats now? Is that kind of you're just going to focus on that?
Seems to be what's coming out of me, which I mean, it was a kind of initially like a therapy thing, like the news of the world and everything being so weird, is I'd find my solace kind of making something very childlike and simple and not on a computer, like using the op1
Mm.
sequencer, sampler. I wouldn't say a sequencer, but sampler and synthesizer to create like the core of the tracks. Literally sitting on this same balcony with my cats a couple years ago. And then
Is that where the name came from? Was it just
Yeah,
you were playing music with your cats?
playing music with my cats, and I think
Nice.
it was inspired by, there's a Japanese artist, Tofu Beats, or maybe no, not Japanese. I think it's just a lo-fi artist called Tofu Beats.
Mm.
And I was like, cat beats. So I also thought heartbeats, cat beats. It came from there, and surprisingly, no one had that. So
Yeah, that's
pretty
surprising actually. 'Cause it seemed to
simple,
be quite
simple
popular.
name. Yeah. I mean, my initial idea was creating kind of lo-fi beats, but with like a very his Beatles psychedelic thing to it,
Right.
which some of the Cat Beats songs do have that. Like I have these boom boom bass guitar lines and like a mellotron sound. I mean, via Cat Beats, it becomes a bit more trip hop. Like this song, I thought it was an acorn, but it was a little guy. It kind of has this like creepy kind of Portishead thing happening, but it's for me, it's kind of coming from this Beatles idea. But even the newer stuff that I haven't released yet is definitely even going further towards this initial idea I had with even more mellotron and stuff like on top of the beats. But originally, I sketched down, I wanted the whole project was going to be called Frodo Lives. Based on that graffiti that people would write in this. That was the thing in the 60s.
Right.
When The Hobbit got really popular. Like hippies would spray paint like Frodo Lives. That was just a thing. Like I think in it, and I like the sentiment of it. It was like, it was a countercultural thing, like kind of being about like going to, the simpler life and rebelling of like what's happening in the world. It's like, let's be hobbits. I mean, I think some hippies, and I mean, in the UK, like whole Glastonbury, like the mysticism around the whole Glastonbury scene.
Yeah, it's pretty dead now. I think there's hippies aren't so very frequent.
No, but I mean, I still think Glastonbury has like its holdouts of kind of the mystics.
Yeah, a little bit in a way, I guess. Well, I guess old school hippies probably more than anything.
Yeah. So the whole sentiment was tied in with that. So originally I was going to call it Frodo Lives, and then I was like, yeah. Then it just became Cat Beats on its own. It didn't stick to that concept as much, but it was a good way to mentally like think about what I wanted to do. And it essentially does connect a lot of things that I like from like that I experimented with in the past musically.
Yeah, because it was Joe Lilly's bass.
Yeah,
but
I still use it. Yeah, it's just a very cheesy like Hohner headless like 80s looking bass, kind of the copy of the Steinberger bass, but and it was used in their van just when he was just because it's easy, it doesn't take up a lot of space just to like jam while you're going to the next show. And I just bought it off Joe for like $100.
Nice.
I was like, I don't know, it sounded good, and I think I don't know, in a way maybe it like helps focus the project. I'm like, Joe's bass, and think about kind of the low end. I wouldn't say like consciously like how he thinks about it, but like I think that when I did Decahedron and Joe played bass on that record, like I definitely became very aware of how he approaches music.
How do you guys meet?
Joe through Dead Meadow, who I ended up recording their album. So the Cassettes before the Cassettes and Dead Meadow were existing at the same time, and then they had a different drummer than the Cassettes. This guy Mark, and Mark, I recorded the first two albums that when Mark was in it, and then when Mark left the band, that's kind of when the Cassettes, that incarnation of the Cassettes ended. Since then, the Cassettes drummer joined Dead Meadow, so we were sharing bassists at the time.
Yeah.
And basically the Cassettes drummer migrated to Dead Meadow, and then that band continued in that form for a while. Oddly, the band is Dead Meadow is still around, and they're back to the original lineup with Mark.
All right. Wow.
And they're in California. But yeah, I just recorded those albums, and Joe had a label at the time. He put out Spirit Caravan, which is members of The Obsessed, the stoner rock and a heavy band from Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
So he had his boutique label at the time called Tolata, and he just wanted to do the Dead Meadow records. They were a local DC band, and then it just fell into place. The Fugazi was taking a pause, and I just asked him if he wanted to help us finish some songs with Decahedron. And then even weirder, I recorded in his house's basement on Fugazi's like open reel 8-track setup. I recorded, I think, if not the only, like one of the only John Peel sessions not recorded at BBC.
Really?
Yeah, which is the Dead Meadow session, the Dead Meadow Peel sessions. So that was pretty stressful having to do that with it in like a night or whatever, like recording it and mixing it. But I was happy that John Peel himself was like, love those period drums. Like he liked the drum recording, which is nice.
Was he there at the time? Like
John Peel was not there, but he broadcasted it and then commented like,
all right, okay.
You know, like he was.
Nano Loop. Because I was like, was like that Game Boy music you made, was that like the first experimentation with electronic music, do you think?
Yeah, I would I guess first I want to say a little more serious experimentation. Like I'd dabble with, my dad was a jazz pianist, not as his trade when we lived in the US. It was his trade kind of in the 60s, but he'd still, there'd be synthesizers and MIDI boxes in his little music room that I'd dabble with. But I guess this was when I wanted to really, I just coming from the retro gaming background and loving all that, and the fact that there was a software and a cartridge that you can make music on a Game Boy. I was like, this is perfect. And especially for going on tour, I could sit there and make my little bleeps and bloops. So that's when I jumped in to try and create something, kind of tapping back the like youthful memories of 8-bit sounds.
Yeah, I think it's like a great thing to have, like a little tiny like portable synth, like any kind of music machine. Because I've got like a little Korg Volca Beats. It's like the most fun you can have with like any instrument. Because you can take it anywhere. You can just like wait for your train, play some beats. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's super fun. I mean, that's why I like the Op One
exactly.
stuff. But yeah, from there I just went to, I delved even more deeper in electronic music, and then kind of jumped to Ableton Live. Like I used different software that had these like MIDI capabilities, like Digital Performer and whatnot prior to that. But for me, making electronic music with like discovering the clip view in Ableton, I felt like that felt where you can make little loops of your parts and then kind of play them like they're always in sync, and you can play them, you can combine as many as you want and like jump around on your grid. For me, that's when it felt like the most creative, because music software always had this engineer mindset of kind of, you see the beginning and the end, and I think there's a level of like stress there. It's like, I need to complete this thing because it's this left to right linear thing.
Yeah.
But when you're in clip view and Ableton, it was more just like, I'm just playing, I'm just in this space.
It's like jamming, just
Yeah, definitely.
jamming.
And I think that's what made me really dig
Yeah.
it. I mean, Nanoloop, it's more of, it's just a step sequencer. So it's, you're definitely jamming with your loops
Mm.
in that sense. But Ableton was the one that really made me kind of jump into that stuff even more.
Mm. Oh,
So Nanoloop, I guess it's like these Germans, German programmers,
yeah.
taking me down that path. Nanoloop from Germany, and then Ableton also from Germany.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy design, just like design a cartridge like back then to like replicate a synthesizer. Because was it literally all these sounds? Like, where did the sounds come from? Was it like different?
It's from the Game
But
Boy.
like
Yeah, from the chip.
just the Game Boy? Was it like different games?
No, just accessing the sound chip
Oh,
and
okay.
Game Boy
Right.
or Game Boy Advance.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So that's it.
Hmm.
So of course they were used in games
Yeah.
if they get whatever access that chip. But I don't know, I feel like Nanoloop like abstracted it in a really nice way.
Mm.
And now it's like baked in software for that analog handheld device. You've seen that thing?
No.
That this like company analog. They do these reissues of like consoles, like a PC Engine or TurboGrafx 16 or Genesis or whatever. They'd
Right.
make these new versions.
Yeah.
They'd officially license new versions with like that will play the cartridges, has HDMI, and has like this very true way of playing back the retro games from their original sources. And they have a handheld that I don't think it's not out yet, or it came out and it sold out very quickly the first batch, which can play any handheld. You can just get different cartridge adapters to change the adapters, but the device has Nanoloop built in.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if you have no cartridge and turn it on, you have Nanoloop in this
Yeah.
handheld.
I'll say it's pretty hard to get Nanoloop now because like the website's sold out and people are reselling them for like 300 quid. Like pretty
Geez.
like crazy price.
Yeah, I stupidly sold the Game Boy Advance version, which is a little more hi-fi than the original one, and I wish I still had that. But yeah, I still have the original Nanoloop. I used it a little bit on some Catbeats stuff I haven't released.
Frodus, I don't know how that's not more well. It's definitely known within like a circle for sure, but like I guess if you look into post-hardcore, that name doesn't really pop out as much as like a lot of bands. I don't think.
I guess for like the deeper heads of it, like influencing Thrice or whatever, like some of these bands that would call it. But I think a lot of it has to do with like I don't know, bad business decisions, like contracts that maybe we signed. I'm serious. I think I talk about this on the Rigs of Dad podcast,
Right.
where I mean, like you can't find like our music on Spotify Europe. It's just in the US because our record label released our last record that was the most notable one, like sold their back catalog to a holding company, and then that company doesn't do anything with the music. It just kind of a part of like a large catalog that they purchase. I mean, ironically for Frodus, it was Frodus signed the last album on what came out on Fueled by Ramen, which became the label that put out Fall Out Boy and kind of these terrible emo bands, like pop things, which is fine if that's what you're into. But the sad thing is the label then kind of, instead of kind of thinking of like their legacy in their catalog, like being like Epitaph would, like this is what we've done and kind of celebrating this and keeping things alive, they just sold it off and literally became Atlantic Records.
Oh, for real.
And in the back catalog, they sold it oddly owned by Rhino Records, which for Frodus is funny because the name Frodus comes from an obscure Monkeys episode, like the 60s TV show. Like, hey, we're the Monkeys. That's where the name comes from. And then we end up on being label mates with the Monkeys as their catalogs on Rhino. So it's very funny and weird, but, you know, it's also lends to the obscurity, you know, like things happen for whatever reason, you know?
Yeah, sure.
I didn't have any gut feeling about that stuff like I did with the board games. Potential failure. I had only one, I guess, a regret in my set and rigs of Dad in my 20-year-old self. Always thought we should have lied to Sub Pop because they were going to sign us. We should have lied and said we didn't break up, but we told them the truth.
Oh, sure.
But in the end, it's also like my 8-year-old self who was watching the Monkeys thinks it's great that we're on the same label as the Monkeys now. So
yeah.
But I think that's the strange thing, as I said, like thinking back to recording sessions and kind of liking all of them for different reasons. It's because you age as a musician and you jump creatively to different things. It's almost like you have, I don't want to say multiple selves in this, like a schizophrenic self, but like you have a life that you lived in this creative, and the world was different around you, and you kind of have this time capsule, and you have a way of thinking about that, like being in a band. When you're 8 years old, you're like, yeah, rock and roll, I want to be in a band. And when you're 20 and doing it, it's like you still have that in you, but you're also not that same person. So that's why I feel like I could literally be like, my 8-year-old self thinks it's great, my 20-year-old self thinks I should have lied, you know, my current self is like, whatever, like it is what it is. No regrets, you know, and everything has like a...
Yeah, I mean, there's no such thing as a bad decision, really. Like every...
No, I think it's worse to have a mediocre session, like to be like meh. It's almost better to be a terrible band because at least people react to it. To make a really bad like Guns N' Roses, Chinese Democracy, like it's crazy. Like guitar solos, like what are they doing? But it's a lot more fun to listen to than probably a lot of things that are just kind of like wah. At least you're like, whoa, you get a reaction. So I think it's either be terrible or be amazing.
Yeah, I guess that's where like punk came from. Like it was just like people just messing around, making all kinds of like gibberish on guitar, and then suddenly they create a sound out of it.
Yeah, I think. I mean that there's energy to that, you know, and I think that's good. But yeah, it's strange and amazing doing creative things and kind of jumping around and having all these different experiences with it. Like I feel really lucky that I got to do all that stuff and continue to still do things in a very like totally bizarre. Like if I brought my like 90s self and be like, you would be making cat music that's very chill, and it's like it's like almost like children's music that people would really like, and like you'll be making cassettes and vinyl. I'd be like, cassettes still? Like like since we'd still be making cassettes in 2020? I'd be like, what are you talking about? But then here I am. It's like totally bizarre.
Is there a temptation to like create a new post-hardcore band?
Do I have a temptation? No, because I always feel like it's well, actually me and Nathan have recorded kind of instrumental Frodus type stuff, but it almost becomes more post-rock. Like I don't want to say mogwai, but almost like a heavier version of post-rock.
I mean,
but it has like these kind of Frodus guitar bass interplay things, but instrumental. But I think going full on and doing something like that, I don't really have a desire because like physically, I don't think I can do it as good as my younger. If I did it, I'd have to have a lot of time to kind of train and be the best, screamer better than I was before. Because you don't want to be, I always say you don't want to be like the fat Elvis, like Elvis at the end of his career. Like, oh, there's Elvis. He's kind of cool, but it's not the same. Like, there's I think, good moments of when to pass the torch for certain things, if you will. But I mean, the present is so crazy, and like the near future is so crazy. I mean, there will probably be a point where you can feed an AI like a Frodus record and be like, can you create a vocalist like this? And it will analyze it and then be able to.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Like, I do think that AI, like you can, AIs can do every job possible. I'm pretty sure.
Eventually, most. But I think it'll be like anything. Like it depends upon the input of whatever the input the human has into the AI. I mean, it'll get weirder when the AI can kind of make convincingly good things by itself without, if the AI develops taste, because you have to feed it an algorithm if you're going to teach it what's good and bad. And then there's so many subtleties to that. Like you're a human who lived your whole life and you've listened to all these different things and have an idea, and now things are so scattered and everyone kind of has their own intake and algorithmic intake of information. It's what good and bad and being is. It's not as, it's widely shared, but it's also completely fragmented and not shared because you can be getting different influences.
Unless they manage to like,
it's less of a shared culture, about like in the Beatles where it's like everyone was in on it. What were you gonna say?
Unless they manage to like copy the DNA of like a human onto an AI, or to like create like almost like a human life experience for them. That'd be pretty crazy, I think. Almost like an AI living through entire life within seconds.
But then then there's people say like, if you create like the vessel for life, would it have a soul? Like these are kind of intense questions.
That's true.
Like, does it then become inhabited by life force and kind of like totally sentient and can think of things like really like we do? We don't know. Is if you create the system complex enough to accommodate like whatever humans need.
Yeah, I think people underestimate what humans actually need, like emotionally. Like it's like
it's extremely complex, and it's hard to do it right. I mean, I think it'll be a while before AI could become like very convincingly human in some ways, I think within parameters it will be able to like copy like a version of you eventually, like analyze your voice and be able to like talk just like you.
Well, that's
kind of learn how you talk.
That's already here, like that technology. Like like there's videos of people like AIs talking like celebrities and they sound exactly the same.
Yeah, like the deep fake stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, we're entering a crazy. If people thought things were bad with like YouTube and strange cults and things people fall into now and like alternative news sources, it's just going to get even more confusing. It's going to be almost like you need to like not be online. Like you need to experience reality with your own eyes, and then like the issue will then be like people won't believe you because they'll be like, that didn't happen. And then if you post a video, someone can deep fake change it, so it's going to be like I mean, it's always cat and mouse. It's going to have to be like YouTube is going to be able to, their AI, their algorithm is going to have to identify these things and wipe them clear before they gain traction. That's the only way. Like they have to be one step ahead to like remove that content. Otherwise, it's going to be full anarchy. It's like, that guy, you said that, he said that. He said, no.
Yeah. Like every sci-fi film ever made.
Worse. I don't think a sci-fi made like has like really shown the informational anarchy where it could go.
Yeah, that's true.
And that maybe we're giving out the idea to someone who listens to this, but yeah, I feel the most poignant but already dated sci-fi I read recently. I forgot his name. I don't have my phone, but it was a British author about. I would say it's like the most William Gibson-esque for this time, even though William Gibson is still writing books, but kind of about a post-internet society. Like there's like a collapse, and lot in England and in New York setting. I'll tell you the name of it, but I think it really captures kind of an AR in marketing reality and kind of this post, like where things can head, where things are heading now, and how it could culturally become super crazy. But he doesn't really do the deep fake thing. It's called Infinite Detail, and it's by Tim Mauchan, British writer. And I think it might be, is it Brighton? There might be some Brighton in it.
All right.
There's definitely a lot of local UK stuff. It's a must read.
Yeah, no.
Very fast. It's a page turner. You're just like, blah, 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 this is crazy.
Yeah.
Like they're talking about Google and like everything's collapsing, and there was all these AR things they had. And
Was it based off like current like life scenarios?
yeah, I would say this is like, it's like 10, 15 years from now. Basically, there's an internet collapse, and then people experience like kind of forgot about the internet, like the younger people or whatever. And then there's people find like the AR specs, and some of them can bring up things. And this one girl tends to think they're ghosts, but it ends up being like just recordings, because it's like, you put on the specs, and then you actually see like what happened in that space. It's more complex than that, but it's great. I devoured that. It was
Yeah, I'm big into like sci-fi novels. Like Slaughtermatic, have you heard of that? That's a crazy book I've been reading. It's even hard to explain what it's about, but like basically this bank robbery set in this near future where like they almost have to like plan the heist within a virtual reality, but like they realize they're already in the virtual reality, so they have to get out of the virtual reality world. It's just very like Rick and Morty-esque, I guess, like kind of, layers, like being within a world, trying to get out of that world, what's real, what's not. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, the Scottish author Charles Stross has his old Halting State books, and they're like these cop books, but it's like there is a heist in this online game world, or in multiple online game worlds, and then like a ton of real money is stolen, and then like these cops have to figure out how that happened and why it happened. So they're kind of flipping between this online game and reality, and then like cop space that they have in their AR glasses that bring up like forensic details about everything. And it's Scotland. It's really cool.
Yeah.
But kind of like a bank. It's a big robbery that happens, and almost this World of Warcraft-y mixed game. I mean, it could happen now. Like we're getting to that level.
Yeah,
How'd you find me anyway? Is it through Nicholas, through El Hervo, or?
Yeah, well, so I'd been following Nicholas for a while, for years, and like obviously from there I started like looking on Swedish Columbia, and I realized you're like the guy who owns it or like created it, and then started looking more into you, and I was pretty baffled actually how much stuff you've done, like, because I just thought you were just a label owner. I didn't know you had a whole career.
Yeah, wouldn't say like a livable wage career, but definitely like keep on making stuff, which is
Yeah,
much more important anyway than like
yeah,
a livable wage as far as music, like the creativity of it. Livable wage with music is a very new idea anyway.
yeah. It's
If you
very
think
hard.
about the past, it's like even recorded music's not that old.
Mm. Well,
So
even back then, was it hard to like keep food on the table?
no, because I was younger and didn't need much, lived in a group house,
Mm.
did bands and then worked odd jobs, did graphic design,
Nice.
learned computer stuff. I mean, in the 90s, so it was fine, you know. It's just
Mm.
different times,
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
and different needs. I mean, now with like family and stuff, it's like definitely more complex, but I also
Mm.
don't want to tour anymore. So it's totally it totally makes sense. But growing up in DC definitely helped, and like
Mm.
being around Discord records definitely helped form kind of every way, the whole way I approach music and look at creativity. It's like documenting a scene, documenting friends, and that kind of being the impetus, and like just keep on creating and the DIY ethic and just make stuff and keep
Mm.
on. I wouldn't say I guess reinvent yourself like based on like what's resonating with you at the time. Like I always feel like Ian Mackay is like a who runs Discord Records and was in Minor Threat and Fugazi is an ideal role model of how an artist can age and should age. Like, can they go in contextually with what makes sense to him at the time and like not going backwards. He's always kind of going forwards, and you always have a little bit of like the influences of what he did before, but it's always kind of a new thing.
Mm.
In some ways, it's very it's almost jazz. I feel like
Mm.
the way like kind of pushing this like a creative energy, and I think I got it from like growing up in DC and with the label, kind of trying to bring it to the people that organically fall into place, like Nicholas and
Mm.
kind of friends around there. So
Well, how long were you in DC for?
good 30 plus years.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. 31 years. I grew up like long time.
Because you weren't born there, were you? Or,
I was born in Romania, but I
yeah.
grew up but I grew up in DC.
Mm.
I was there since I was a kid, so I don't remember anything from like Romania per se.
Yeah.
I feel more American than I do Romanian.
Mm.
You know, I guess in a way that's I guess the initial idea of America. Everyone's from all these different places, but they're Americans, contrary
Yeah,
to
definitely.
what's happening right now. But so yeah, I think that I would say that definitely like informed everything, like musically, creatively. And we're looking back on it, it's a very unique time. Like, and it's a very unique place. Like, you grew up in Los Angeles, it's a whole different. I lived in Los Angeles, didn't grow up there, but in later years in my life. But it's a totally different music culture. Like, DC is such a unique bubble of like being in a very political, not cool town, but to have such a vibrant music, I think it's almost like it's like a counter energy to what's happening on like kind of the bigger level of the city historically.
Yeah.
So if anything, it did like really encourage creativity in music.
Yeah, sure.
I even found out that the Jazz Times magazine, which was kind of the premier magazine for jazz, came from DC. I had no idea. So there's a lot of things kind of creatively happen there.
I think there's a lot of creativity comes from like a load of like bored teenagers, or like teenagers who are just like want to start shit.
Yeah. I mean, now it seems like people, younger generations maybe think about doing Instagram accounts maybe more than
Yeah,
bands.
definitely.
But
Yeah.
I mean, you can still be creative and do cool things there.
Mm.
If we're trying to do photography or art or whatever, I mean, as long as you're doing it with the right intentions.
Mm.
I guess there's always people who want to do things to be famous, but I don't know. What is punk now? Is it being a memer? I have no idea.
Yeah.
It's very.
I think memes too popular to be punk.
Memes always feel like to me like, you know, those old comedy the comics, like Mad Magazine,
Yeah.
Cracked Magazine. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's like lesser versions of those, because there's like those magazines there's like an artist drawing the little cartoon and like making fun of whatever, and like there's a craft to it. The meme is just like these really poorly designed things that are like blah blah blah, but they get the idea across. But it's I guess I shouldn't say it doesn't have a craft, because you have to be witty to make one that works, but it's definitely not, you're not hand drawing a comic panel,
Yeah.
like a magazine. But some people do, so I don't know. It's just an evolution of human communication, I guess.
I guess it's a very simple thing to make if you have a good idea. Like if you have a good idea for a meme, you can make it straight away.
Maybe the pyramid was the first meme. It's like the gods like triangles, let's make pyramids. And then like for whatever reason, people in South America are like, yeah, the gods like triangles. Why am I thinking about this? I don't know. And then people in Egypt, yeah, triangles, gods like these things, yeah. And then like everyone's making pyramids. You're like, why are everyone's making pyramids right now?
That's a pretty good story.
Maybe. For the first meme. I mean, first meme is probably, we're going so far off topic now. I don't even know if you're going to have this on the show. First meme is probably like a cave painting of a deer.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely. But a meme would have text on it, surely. So,
well, pre-language, I think it's this idea of like, let's celebrate this animal that we like. It gives us sustenance, or celebrate like your like reproductive organs, because you create these, make babies, and it's super weird. Like if you're early man, you know, you draw a picture of like, I mean, the UK has like a huge Neolithic, you know, naked man on a hillside, right?
wait, what?
Yeah, what is that? The hill figure, the long man of Wilmington. Yeah, and he has his whole what's it? Hill figures, 18th century onward. I don't know, I guess it's not that old. The Shern Abbas giant. Shern Abbas giant. It's part of the National Trust. Look this up.
I will do. At least it can't be destroyed, because that's National Trust means if you destroy it, going to jail.
They say, yeah, they don't know when it was created, 17th century. So it's not quite cave paintings, but I don't know. The meme expression of the pre-language meme.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know how we ended up here, but
yeah, I'm not sure. But you know,
I guess expressions. Good people don't do bands, people do Instagrams. That's how we
I think that's
ended up here.
That's how every conversation goes, surely, to like complete gibberish.
Good. I was listening to a podcast about Lenny Kravitz, out of all people, and he talked about, like, because he was recording with Rick Rubin at the time, the Johnny Cash and June Carter coming, like, consoling him when his mother died.
All right.
And he like wrote about it in the song, and he never even met them. He didn't really know them, and they knew something was wrong when he came back to like the house, and they just like came and like held. He said he was just held by them. Super intense, but amazing. You hear the story, you're like, wow, Johnny Cash, June Carter, they just know. They knew. They've been through so much, and there's like they knew as soon as he walked through the door, like something was wrong. When Rick Rubin's big mansion or whatever, wherever he was staying in California.
Mad.
It was a good. It gave me like more. Not that I'd never like. I always respected Johnny Cash and all that, but it almost made me like him even more. Like hearing this story, I was like, wow, that's incredible.
So I don't know much about his personal
You know.
life. I'm not sure if he was a nice person or he must have been.
Johnny Cash. I think he had his troubles. I don't know if he was drinking or what was his thing, but when he kind of comes from a whole different world and a different reality when he started music, and then where he kind of stopped, and kind of how he reinvented, how it kind of became prominent again. The podcast that Broken Record.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I think I've heard of it.
They're very good.
Yeah.
Like I end up listening to about artists that I don't really listen to, like pop artists, like Pharrell or whatever, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Like Pharrell is I had no idea he was from Virginia Beach, like not that far of DC, and he's talking about his childhood and like kind of the like very deep kind of like Virginia amusement park stuff that I went to, and kind of how he's interesting because as popular as he is, he's such not a pop guy. He's so almost, I don't want to say he's definitely not DC, but very grounded. He's like, he lived in LA for a little bit and he thought it was insane, and he wanted to have like just focus on family and like do work when he has to do work. So he moved to Florida or whatever, but just how he talks is, I don't know. I had a whole new respect for him too. I was like, wow, kind of hearing this other side of these artists that you never really, I personally don't listen to. And then like kind of almost like you're like what you talk about, just like the creative process and kind of seeing, kind of having, you gain like a respect and like almost you become curious. Like, maybe I should listen to something if like after hearing the context of how the artist thought about something. Because it seems like a lot of them kind of come to this point where they feel like the ideas just, they kind of pull them. They just come to, the idea just comes to them. They have like dry spells, and then there are times where they actually work on a lot of songs, like trying to like get them out of them. But I think a lot of them it just kind of comes, and then
for sure, like
it's there or it's not.
Yeah, like that's definitely something like you can't really just like get like straight away. It's more like I feel like bad experiences definitely help with that as well. You know, if you have like a bad experience, it's usually gonna have some kind of creativity at the end, like musically or anything.
Definitely, if you need to like expel those emotions somewhere, it's I feel like I even talked to Nicholas about this once. It's like you're just like creative vomiting or something where you're talking about like you're just like you got to get out of your system, like blah, and then kind of whether it's something you keep as a record on like a record, or you just have to like do it. I mean, people are lucky who can get that out that way, because then I mean other people, like bad experiences like alcohol or whatever could lead to. I almost feel like I had to deal with not screaming in it. As soon as I was not screaming in a band, I would oddly feel more anxious because I didn't have anywhere to put the energy.
Yeah.
Because screaming in a punk band, it's just like it's all the anxiousness goes out.
Yeah.
And you don't get as anxious, but like it's almost like I get more anxious the older I get, because maybe I've been the same my whole life, but I don't have that. I have to find a new way to channel that energy, that sensitivity of like what you're pulling from, the vibe you're getting from life, like people, cities, whatever. if you're not screaming it in a punk band, it has to go somewhere.
Yeah, it's a bit more natural
You know.
than like I guess screaming in just a room by yourself.
Yeah. So now it's almost like it's a little bit of Catbeats, a little bit of Forest Walks, and it has to like spread out. It was easier with punk. In 20 minutes, you
Yeah.
felt great. You know, but there's so much to that. It's like there's a physicality to it, and then there's emotional. I mean, maybe instead of gyms, they should just have like scream rooms. Instead of going to a gym, you just go into a room. You're like, you tense up your muscles, and then it's like meditation or take a bath or whatever.
I'm surprised it's not a thing, to be honest, because I think a load of people would do that.
Going back to the 60s, I think there was a thing, like a movement of primal scream therapy back then. That was a thing. I think even John Lennon was doing it with like Yoko Ono on like some of those records. I think Yoko was all about it. With like kind of her more her experimental solo records and all that.
I feel like I've been talking to you for a long time, so. But
yeah, okay. Well, hopefully this is something interesting out of this.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
We jumped around. I have a big catalog, so there's a lot of time. There's a lot of jumping around.
Yeah,
it's hard to like.
Yeah.
I guess piece it linearly together, but yeah. Let me know if you ever want to chat again.